Hey, it's G Stack George on the 90 Degrees podcast, and we just had a banger of an episode with none other than Drew Dinsick. We talked about how to beat informational markets, Drew's all-time favorite future win, and the time he went one-on-one with Adrian Wojnarowski and beat him. That and more on today's episode of the 90 Degrees podcast. Welcome to the 90 Degrees podcast, where we give an inside look into the sports betting industry. If you were expecting Kevin Davis and hadn't heard, Kevin has gotten an incredible opportunity that unfortunately doesn't allow him to continue the show. I have been given the honor to take over and continue what the whole team has built and continue to push forward the sports betting world from an educational standpoint. For those that don't know me, my name is G Stack George, and I have made a living betting sports exclusively the past 4 years. I spent 5 years in news media before that, and I'm now blending both my worlds. Without further ado, my guest this week is someone I've been wanting to interview for a while now. His name is Drew Dinsick, co-host of the Deep Dive podcast and analyst for NBC Sports Edge. Drew, thanks for joining me.
Hey, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be the first interviewee by G Stack George on this. What has been a very enjoyable stream. Always love when kind of intelligent new gambling content hits the podcast feed, because honestly, like it feels like a totally different world compared to like back in the day when everybody who was talking about gambling was either running a scam or like just obviously didn't have skin in the game or just didn't know what they were talking about. So I'm hugely thankful that there are more people with reputable kind of backgrounds starting to get into this, and appreciate you guys inviting me.
Yeah, back in the day where Stu Feiner and Brandon Lang were yelling that they're going to rip your bookie's balls off. I am part of the educational wave of content creators in this space. Drew, I want to tell you, I discovered who you were by accident a few years ago. I'm watching YouTube. I'm watching Captain Jack's series, and he's interviewing legendary gambler Dink. And they made reference that Dink was played by Bruce Willis, if those that didn't know, in the movie Lay the Favorite. So I'm like, oh, this is unbelievable. I've seen this movie before. So I go on Twitter, and I guess I'm typing Dink and sports betting, and Drew Dinsick pops up, and I'm like, oh, that's great. I found him, followed him, and it took me about 4 months until your first video went on. I'm like, he looks a lot younger now. Like, he's reverse aged, and then I finally put together that you're two different people.
I got to meet Dig. He was just a delightful person, like truly like just a golden heart, and really sad that he passed, but he lived life well, and yeah, if I can have as much enjoyment in life as he got out of it, then I'll be doing well.
I got to connect with Dink before he passed, and we shared a love of sports betting and wrestling, and he was a gentleman the whole way through. Drew, I want to talk about the start of your life in sports betting. How quickly did you get into sports betting? How young were you?
In college, opened a first account sophomore year. Guy who's a couple years older than me, was betting college basketball pretty heavily. We were playing darts, and he was like, he wouldn't shut up about how Long Beach State was underrated. Books didn't understand. They were going to kill Pepperdine. They shouldn't be 3-point dogs. And I was like, all right, man, like, what is going on here? Like, what are you doing? How are you doing this? Tell me how it's done. And, opened up a sportsbook.com account at the time, and loaded up $100 for my debit card, and Long Beach State won outright, and I was like, God, this is easy. Oh my gosh. You just need to know someone who knows the answer key, and you just fire away. And, that was in 2000, I want to say. So It's now 23 years later, still doing it. And, it's been a fun journey, but, I was a absolute fish in the pool for many years. And then, it's kind of graduated from sportsbook.com to Wessex back in the day. I don't know if you've heard stories about them, but they were the first ones to really kind of offer exotic, interesting things. Like, you could buy live contracts, which were, kind of the precursor to today's live betting. And, And that was just an absolute ton of fun. But ultimately, I think it was around the time that, Bush really cracked down on offshore poker stuff, that I felt like this is a sucker's game. I've lost a lot of money doing this.
Yeah.
Even if I win money, I'm probably not ever going to get it out of here. So at that point, I just kind of said, okay, well, I'll focus on career building at this point. And, never had a bookie, never really had any paper head accounts or anything like that. Just kind of went away from, got away from it and just playing fantasy and focusing on being a professional. And then that all kind of changed in a instant when you got stability in the offshore space with the likes of the Bovadas and the Five Dimes and the Bet Onlines of the world, where you're like, oh wait, actually you can get money on and off here. They're not going to seize this. This is has like a whiff of legality to it, so, or stability, I guess is probably a better word. So at that point, I started playing more, and that was probably in like the 2014 range. And again, I was still fish, losing, loading up my account to bet football every September. And
Yep.
if I made it to the end of the season, then I would donk it away on college basketball. If I made it to the end of the college basketball season, I would donk it away on baseball and then reload again in September. And that was kind of the rinse and repeat there for 3-4 years before I got pretty serious about this.
What was the moment where you figured out what you're doing and you're not chasing away and donking it off, and Sunday nighter comes and you got $823 in your account, so it all goes on the game even if you didn't love it. What was the moment you're like, okay, I kind of know what I'm doing here?
Well, I think I went through a span where I lost 23 or 24 bets in a row. And that sounds impossible to say it out loud, but a bunch was correlated. Like I would play first half team total game on a college football side, and they'd all lose. And did that like had one kind of general. It was just all like in a week, and I was like, this I can't keep doing this. Like this isn't good for my mental health. I was a miserable person around my friends and wife, and I was like, I gotta find a better way to do this. And I did exactly what you said. I think on Monday Night Football it was Redskins Cowboys. Colt McCoy was quarterback. I remember all this. And the Redskins were dogs, big dogs, like 8-10 points maybe.
Yep.
Total was pretty high. And I was like, you know what? Like, this is probably my last bet. Colt McCoy, and he's live. I'm going to parlay, Redskins win with the total going under, and put the entire rest of my account in that. And I was like, if this loses, like I'm completely walking away. And if it wins, then I'm going to like find a better way to do this. And it won. And I was like, okay, well, I gotta like find some resources. I got to read about what am I doing wrong? Like, I hadn't even considered like, how do you make your own number? Like I was
Yep.
literally betting with my gut, like, this doesn't feel right. These guys are playing great. This price,
Sure.
this looks wrong. Like it was all qualitative bullshit. And I definitely kind of came out of that like, okay, a renewed purpose of like, I got to get serious about this. I'm not going to have another one of these losing streaks again. And I'm going to see if I can get good at this. And I'm still very much learning. I think of it at least. The entirety of that point forward, everything I've done involved in the gambling space has been an effort to try to network, learn more, get more information, become a better player. I think that's sort of the process that everyone goes through once you get to the level where you're doing this at a high enough level to be taking it seriously.
Well, you mentioned the media space, and I want to talk about how you consume the media space. But first, I want to talk about you getting into being a media personality. When does that happen? Is that something you wanted to do early on before it happened, or did you kind of just fall into it?
Yeah, a little bit of both. The You have conversations with your friends when you're, the Powerball's $1 billion. Like, how many tickets are we buying? Okay. We're definitely winning this. Well, what are you going to do with your share of the winnings? Or you're talking around, and it's like, well, if I won the Powerball, like I'd quitting my job for sure, and I'd probably get into sports talk radio. Like, yeah, that was what I would do. What I would do. So, like in the back of my head, it was something I always was interested in doing, just because I like just enjoy the format. I like having conversations. I like talking, about sports more than I like talking about anything else. Then It was random kind of Labor Day weekend. We were driving with my wife out from Denver Airport up to the mountains to go do our traditional annual Oktoberfest at Beaver Creek Village, which is up by Vail, and we were listening to Bill Simmons' cousin Sal talking about you know win totals and just previewing the NFL season, and I'm going on and on like these guys don't know what they're talking about. They're not even using the right lingo. Like they're not betting. Like they don't, or if they are, they're absolute idiots. Like I had been taking things seriously for a good year and a half, maybe 2 years, built up a decent following on Twitter, just posting my numbers. And, my wife was like, "Oh, you think you could do better than these guys? Then why don't you do it?" And so I was like, "Oh, I guess I'm getting into the podcast game." And I figured like, well, we'll see how hard this is. We'll start putting episodes up and see if anyone listens. And the response we got from the first episode we posted was like overwhelming. I was like, how? And I don't even know if SoundCloud was juicing the counts or whatever, but I was like, this can't be real. Like this many people listen to us, really? Like they care? Like wow. And the actual like kind of comments and feedback we got back was like, oh, this is cool. This is for real. We should actually try to see how we can grow this. And it was a hobby at first, and then one day you wake up and you're like getting calls and offers where it's like, oh, this could actually now be a professional endeavor. Let's go for it. And it was like, so it's kind of in the back of my head that I always wanted to do this, but the actual kind of throwing our hat in the ring and then how it's grown to this point and being able to do this on behalf of NBC is all stuff that I don't think I would have ever dreamed of when we started.
Before we get to our next question, I just want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Pinnacle. Pinnacle is the world's sharpest sportsbook and available to bettors in Ontario. Find out what professional bettors have known for decades. Pinnacle is where the best bettors play. Must be 19 plus in Ontario. Please play responsibly. Not available in the US. Yeah, I love that. You really hit close to home for me because I'm listening to expert gamblers, and I believe some of them are very good at betting, but they're explaining rules of like preseason overtime in the NFL, and I'm just like, no, that's not a thing. Like you're not accurately saying anything right now, and they're giving you an edge based on a false proposition, and I'm like, I've had enough of it. I think we need more positive voices that are very educated in the space. And I said, you know what? I'm just gonna build myself a studio and start doing stuff slowly and surely. I want to talk about listening to media because I overconsume, especially during the football season. And
Sure.
it's not so much about like, oh, what's this guy on? What's this guy on? I just want to refine my process. Sometimes the best tidbits I get are from shows that are not even about betting.
Nope. Yeah.
Just there's really smart guys in the football space. They don't understand the betting aspect, but they understand the football aspect. And a lot of what I do is through matchup handicapping. Do you do that? Do you consume media during the football season? I know some people who say, no, I'd prefer to just block it all out so I don't bias my opinion.
I consume as much as I possibly can. I don't overweight like listening to other people break things down, but it is a huge, huge element of my process for sure. There are different categories of people I will listen to. There are people who I know have skin in the game, who are going to move markets, who are going to, our friends on the Matchbook Pod. I want to know before we get to that part of the week where they're leaning, what are they going to be doing, and because I know the markets are going to react to that, and so there's a segment of media I'll consume where I'm trying to just get a sense of market sentiment. And then there's sort of what you're alluding to, which is the athletic football shows, the Mina Kimes show, the Ringer
Yes, yeah,
with
the
Ben
North
Solak
American.
and
Yeah.
in them. Like there's those guys who are kind of breaking it down outside of the veil of gambling, and they absolutely have nuggets that are applicable to applying to a matchup handicap, to a qualitative layer that you want to add onto your numbers. Th- there's no way that I'm ever going to get to the point where I can crush film and tell you this is what matters based on the film analysis.
Sure.
But I think it's a good, it's a good shortcut to listen to people who do, and kind of specifically try to glean their takeaways and weave it into your process in some way. So yeah, that's a football is the easiest to do that with because there's pretty clear, obvious blue chip sort of avenues of content. Basketball, similarly, there's True Blue, Nate Duncan and the Dunked On Pod.
Yeah.
That like they'll explain it to you. Want to know? They will tell you. And you if you can kind of take that information, Zach Lowe, if you take that information, weave it into your NBA handicap, you're going to absolutely be rewarded for it, in my opinion.
I'm gonna get some flack here because I'm gonna compare myself to the U.S. president for a quick second. Much in the way that, they'll get all their top advisors in a room and get, all right, what's your opinion? What's your take? And then it's up to him to make the drill down assessment and what they need to do. I'm a very good aggregator of information. So I find the more I consume, I can drill down what I believe is an accurate representation of all the data. That's always been one of my strengths in life. So that's where the analogy comparing myself to the president is that I'm not the best at creating my own original ideas, but I know how to expand on ideas and which ideas actually have promise or not.
I love that, and I think the among the many very valuable tricks that I've learned is the ability to kind of diffuse responsibility for certain things to a network of people who you can trust, and then basically say, okay, I expect to get this information. Injuries, great example.
Yeah.
Like I'm not on the beat for the Bears. I'm not in the locker room. I can't kind of gauge, kind of the nuances of, how a guy is dealing with a twisted ankle or whatever.
Yeah.
But I know exactly who to look for to provide information on that sort of stuff. And so if you can kind of disseminate your responsibilities for the various things that matter most, and then, kind of bring them back together into a, kind of an overall handicap, then I think you're doing it right.
All right. I've talked to many people in the sports betting space. Some of them, it's just all about the money. Others, there's part of the validation of the process and being right. What's the most satisfying bet for you, like that you win? Like, I'll give you an example of, like, you get the opening line, it closes a lot further, but the people who bet the close didn't beat the market, but you did. Like, that's the all right, being ahead of market, I was right. And just those small 5% of examples where I won because I was smart, I was early enough on the market. Is there a type of bet that you make that gives you, like rewards you even more than the money itself?
Without question. And it is the money part of it for me is always going to be a little bit different than I think a lot of other professional players, because I don't rely on this for income. Almost everything that I'm making sports betting, I'm immediately turning it out in, spending it on a Croatian vacation, or buying, trying to save up to buy a boat, or a vacation house, right? Like, it's literally luxury money for me. So I ultimately don't ever see kind of life-changing money being possible. Maybe it is, but I think realistically, if I'm like trying to hit 8-figure type of turnaround in a year, it's not going to be coming from sports betting. It's coming
Yeah.
from some other avenue, right? And so even 7 figures, probably not. Maybe if I continue to get better at NFL, I could hit that kind of a number in a year, or win like a circuit contest or something like that. Like, that's not crazy, but that's aspirational. But the skin in the game from being a public figure saying, the Super Bowl price is wrong,
Yeah.
Mahomes should be the favorite. Like, you do 2 weeks of media talking up that sort of stuff, and when you're right, it's amazing, and when you're wrong, it sucks. It
Yeah.
sucks. It sucks. It sucks. It's like an exponential factor on, right or wrong. And you can be right about the context in every way, and variance can still sting you. and nobody cares. And you can tell yourself that, and you can be dead wrong and still get a winner, and people are patting you on the back, and you're like, thanks. I guess. But it's just, there's a lot of complicating factors, but I guess the best day I've had recently, sports betting wise, was last Friday. Djokovic played Carlos Alcaraz at the French Open. For 2 weeks, everybody that asked me, I told them I thought Djokovic should be favored for the title because of path. I thought that was a coin flip match. He shouldn't be a dog. He opened plus 160, closed plus 170. So the market was against me every which way, but I stuck to my guns and I was like, Joker is going to win. He's going to win. He's going to win. He's got the experience. He's got the experience. He's got experience. And that, I think, ultimately was the reason why he was the victor, just because of his ability to, navigate best of 5 tennis, and being right about that was as good as winning money on that match and winning money on him winning the title. Like, maybe better. Because people kind of, you kind of build up long-term credibility being right in the biggest moments.
Yep.
If you're doing media, right? Like there's kind of two things that I feel like I've learned doing media. Number one is you can, whether you're being a 1,000,000% transparent, saying your record, recapping aggressively, like no one really cares about that at the
Yep.
end of the day, as long as like you are being 100% honest that you are actually betting it.
Yep.
Right? Like, if I have a great season or a terrible season, whether I'm out there banging my chest or groveling and saying I'm sorry, does not matter as long as I'm actually doing it. Right? That's my opinion, at least. I think, and at least the relationship I have with our audience, I think. And the emotional swings of having a great week, having a terrible week, having a great season, having a terrible season, being right in the biggest game, being wrong in the biggest game, like all of those things are part of building a kind of a very authentic brand, I think. And so the actual record keeping for at least at my level, I don't think matters as much as the authenticity does. And so but the things people will definitely remember is that guy went on every show and every freaking podcast for 2 weeks and hammered the table about Djokovic, and sure shit, he was right.
Yep.
And like that kind of stuff is legacy building in terms of your, people's opinion of your opinion.
Yep.
And so those things matter more for sure. Like if 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 Bradbury intercepts Pat Mahomes in the end zone instead of getting that flag in the Super Bowl and the Eagles win,
Yeah.
and and the Chiefs lose, like without question, people are like, "Oh, that guy! Oh man, he was so sure the Chiefs were going to win,"
Yeah.
and and that's not lost on me at all. And like I will tell you with sincerity beyond belief that the Eagles played a 95th percentile game. Outside of that penalty, outside of the fumble by Jalen Hurts, that was as good as they ever probably could have done. And yet it was still the Chiefs. And to me, that tells me that the handicapping that I was doing was correct, even though you got a 50th percentile type of game out of the Chiefs and a 95 percentile game out of the Eagles, and it still didn't matter. Right. But nobody's going to listen to that. Nobody cares. You were wrong. In the eyes of a lot of the consumers of the media. So, it's the big stuff, as stupid as it is, and as often as you get to like an NBA finals this year. And I was like, the market's right. There's no bet to be had here. Like, but still, like people expect you to kind of provide context, provide commentary, give them a bet. And that type of stuff is tough, but it ends up mattering. So you got to be sharp in those moments or you lose credibility, I think, at least with your average consumer for the type of stuff we do.
I'm glad you led me this way because when I asked the question, I had a pathway to a conversation I wanted to have. For myself, it's also when I'm bucking the sharp market. You always feel better to be lined up with the sharp market, but whenever you can say no, I'm off market, but I believe I'm right. And for me, that team last year was the Bengals. I often had to bet them at close just because the market refused to believe that they were as good as they were. You had a big moment last year. Right now, it's the week of the NBA draft. You have a huge moment. I am attached to this not because I bet it, because I'm an Orlando Magic fan. So for those that didn't know, Jabari Smith was talked about to Orlando as if it was a certainty and priced that way. And for about a week or two before, the market started to steam towards Paulo Banchero going first overall. And the morning of Woj, so Adrian Wojnarowski, he is the Adam Schefter of basketball. Those are the two biggest insiders in sports today. He comes out and he says, "Nope, it's still Jabari Smith first overall." And then Drew puts his balls on the table, does a media run, and says, "Woj is wrong. It's Paulo Banchero." Because after Woj's tweet, the markets re-steamed back to Jabari Smith, and you could have got
Oh
another
God.
bite at the apple with Paulo Banchero. Um, that was a big risky move by you to basically say I'm right and this legendary basketball insider is wrong. Um, can you describe that for those that didn't know and how you felt during that week?
That was the you're giving me chills trying to remember that week, man. That was the most
Ever,
ridiculous week.
ever.
Um man. And in the people will assume that I had the goods, like I had the inside information, and that was why I was willing to do that sort of kind of stump. I did not have it. I did not have it. There are 500 screenshots on my phone of me going back and forth between the different groups and telegrams and DMs of like, I'm hearing this, I'm getting this, I'm getting this. Like what is happening? Like, what is going on here? And it was 100% just a flat out handicap that the market was wrong. The only inside stuff that we had is we had connections to his camp because his camp was pretty big. A lot of AAU coaches, a lot of people at Auburn that were willing to talk, and they gave us the sincere impression from just honestly like didn't go great with the Magic. Like it was bad. It was a bad meeting, and this was not even really private. There was public reports that it didn't go great with Jabari,
Yep.
and so I didn't really realize how much liquidity was in the NBA draft markets. I assumed it was nothing. I assumed it was going to be tough to get a bet down of size. And I wanted to be, but the prices for Banchero this time relative to the draft. So this Friday before the Father's Day weekend, before the NBA draft, the following week was when we kind of cooked up the betting strategy for this, which was it doesn't look good for Jabari. Chet Holmgren had some medical red flags that were obvious, and like the reports on the Friday before were that his team was specifically withholding medical information from the Magic.
Yeah.
And so it was literally like, this market is wrong. Banchero should not be 20-1. What do we do about this? And it turns out that the number one overall pick market was pretty deep from a liquidity standpoint. They would write pretty big bets, particularly at the legal shops. And we wanted paper tickets because it was big numbers. And the idea when we first got down was literally like, let's just corner the price on this. We'll use our influence to try to like, steam the market one way or the other. And then, we'll buy out or we'll buy some Smith at lower prices and we'll just kind of neutral, arb this thing
Yeah.
because 20-1 is crazy. And, the guy that was helping me do all this, who's really well connected, he's sending messages to all the movers he knows to get paper tickets. Nobody's getting back to him. I'm like, we were trying to get 5K down at 20-1. That was the goal. And we got no responses back on Sunday because it was Father's Day. Everybody had their phones off. And so it was like Sunday night. He's like, man, I tried everything. I'm sorry, but I don't think we're going to get it. I'm like crushed because there's no offshore. I can't click any buttons myself. I'm just like, I'm like, bet online. I take $100 and then you're locked out. Bookmaker didn't even have the market open. or if they did, it was already beat down a little bit. So I was like, I was just depressed. And then Monday, I get like a 5 a.m. like emergency call, and he's like, everybody got back to me. They all had their phones off because of Father's Day, and we got a lot more than we were looking for on this. And so then it was like, oh shit, like what do we do now? Like this is going to be a this is real. Like this is real. Like we got to figure out a way to kind of leverage. We got to find a way to kind of balance. Shed some risk. Like how do we even do that? Somebody that we had moving for us was, I don't even know who, but somebody was blabby or like saw or overheard or like got somebody over on the other side of the counter was like, hey, I wrote a ticket for a lot on Banchero 20-1, and so did all these other guys. Like word spread enough that other people were kind of behind us on this for sure.
Yeah.
And the price crashed on Sunday night, Monday morning, and at that point it was literally, we didn't even have to do anything to like try to change sentiment in the market.
Yeah.
And we used some other interesting ways to we put feelers out there on some exchanges to take the risk off for us, right?
Sure.
At the new prices. And we were just kind of waiting, and we're like, the minute that those go, somebody with the goods who does know is, the only reason that you would take those bets at those prices if you actually had the nuts.
Yeah. Yeah.
And somebody took them on Wednesday night, and we were like, game over. That's it.
That's
Like this, it actually is Banchero. Like we got this. Like this is good. And then Thursday morning, like I'm texting my friend Gil on VSiN, and I'm like, hey, yeah, do you want to do a little NBA draft Thursday morning? Do a little victory tour on Paulo? Like this will be fun. And then Woj, 5 minutes before we went on air, was like, still Jabari. And
yeah.
I'm like, no way somebody took those bets off from us if they didn't have actual inside information, but it was still just speculative. Like we didn't have somebody in the war room saying we've made our decision. We didn't have anyone in Banchero's camp. Banchero's camp didn't know until they freaking said it. Like it was all just a total surprise. And that whole day I had Bookmaker open watching that market because they were taking 1,000 a click on Banchero at like a 3-1, 4-1 type of price. And it's just like, waiting for it to go. Like you could have gotten 10 clicks in before they took the market down. Like just like somebody take this, go, like make it go. And it never happened all day. Like I can tell you, I got zero work done that week. Only on my phone, texting friends and watching the bookmaker price, hoping for it to go. And then hour before, Woj tweets change of plans, whatever he tweeted. Banchero was in consideration, and once Woj capitulated, that was like click it as hard as you can. Market's gone, and then you're like, all right, it's over. Like it's over. We were right. I can't fucking believe we were right. Like it was surreal. That's the best experience I've ever had from a betting standpoint. Most stressed week though. And
you can't bottle that adrenaline that you probably
no.
I want to talk about
no, absolutely
information.
ridiculous.
All right, before we get to our next question, I just want to give a quick shout out to BetStamp. The easiest way to improve as a sports bettor is use multiple sports books and always get the best odds. We recommend using an odds comparison tool like BetStamp. BetStamp compares odds across every sports book for games, futures, and player props. Save time and money by checking BetStamp before you bet. Download the app today. I want to talk about information markets because obviously we attack them differently than something where you're handicapping and you're using your own numbers. How much of it is you looking at a situation, identifying like team need, fit with player, and mispriced outcomes versus you getting the tap on the shoulder and saying, hey, I've got it on good authority that this is happening? How like what's the spread there? Is it mostly you connecting the dots, or is it someone outright telling you here's what's happening?
Yeah, networking is enormously important. No, that was a huge lesson from that draft. It's a huge lesson from every draft cycle. Like the more good, smart people you know, the more access you have to huge liquidity in these pools, the more information is going to find you. Um, for the most part, my assumption is that the there's not there's not a lot of, or at least people who do have the goods, some of them I'm sure are like greedy and trying to get something for it, and they're gonna try to sell it. What's this worth, right? Like I'm sure, yeah, I've never bartered in that sort of space because it's just gross. And but at the same time, like, there are really good professional gamblers that I know that are well connected to agents, well connected to teams, coaches, you name it, and they'll get information. They will. And when it comes to draft markets, that's all that matters. Like there's some problem solving, like the Paulo stuff,
Yeah.
like that. But that was still information based, right? It
Yes.
was just, where were you looking? Who were you listening to? What did you? How were you qualifying the information that was coming in? Because you get a Woj tweet that says it's still Jabari. If you have 100% weight on Woj's opinion, then that's all the information that matters. But if you have a different opinion, different set of weights, then you're gonna have a different read on that. And but yeah, when it comes to just literally information that's not public, it's it's really tough to get meaningful liquidity on stuff like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, yeah.
You know what I discovered through the NFL draft this year is there's so much information and most of it is junk and there's some really good stuff. And I said, now we're gonna have to start charting all the experts in the field and who had good info and who was fed crap through an agent
Oh
because
yeah.
with the NFL there was a lot of misinformation and a lot of different guys steamed at different moments, especially with that second overall pick.
Yeah, yeah. No, oh yeah, without question. I still don't really know what happened there. Like the stuff that we had was from solid gold people and information, and it was all just not close to what ultimately transpired. And I mean, the way that the market reacted to this current NFL draft cycle, particularly on the day of, it didn't really seem like anyone really knew that Stroud was an option, because you could have gotten some massive prices at big old clicks
Yeah.
at Bookmaker all day long
You
on
coulda got
Stroud, and no,
5 to 1, like, up to 2
yeah,
hours before the draft.
yeah, oh yeah,
Yeah, it wasn't until that last 40-minute stretch where all the info came flying in, and
yeah,
if you were lucky enough to have some slow-moving PPHs, you could still clean up a little bit.
yeah. And I did not at all. It was a losing draft for me, which is almost inexcusable. Like the idea of losing money on an information
Yeah,
it's kind of like, it's pretty fucking embarrassing, honestly. It's You should not be betting information markets and losing. But and I got lucky because we I had a good read on the Levis not being the Colts number one option for whatever reason. It was like, it just didn't, like, the stuff that was out there was all kind of like, didn't really check out. And Ursay is obviously had his hands on, and he was doing stuff that implied he wanted Richardson. So when the owner's doing stuff, you pay attention, because he's ultimately the guy that's really making the decision on a quarterback draft. And so I ended up getting a good chunk of Richardson under 4.5 for at like 3-1 ish. I went to war with somebody because I would bet it, I would triple click it at Bookmaker, and then it would go right back. And I'm like, wow, like, huh. Like, so somebody was very sure I was wrong on that one. But that actually allowed to, kind of get a pretty good coverage there. And that covered most of my absurd, terrible bets that I made on Levis, like under 4.5. I laid big prices on that. Usually, kind of philosophically, when it comes to draft stuff, like, I'm not laying prices for the
no,
most part, unless it's something that I think is like 90, it's lined 90 and it should be 99. Like,
yeah,
I'll lay that stuff, but usually at the death, right? Like right at the close, I'll go bananas on that stuff just to get liquidity into the market for small return.
yeah,
But I made some terrible decisions about laying juice early in the cycle this time. And I mean, the way that the Texans conducted their entire process and ultimately their decision making and what they did on draft day spoke. They might have made their decision 40 minutes before when the market went.
Yeah, they
It
caused
might have been, yeah, it might have
caused
been the owner's wife. Who the hell knows? Like, I honestly don't know who made that pick or why. We had really good info on the draft board for the Texans that did not have Stroud as their number 2 quarterback, and they take him number 2. So it's there was some really really bizarre stuff about that whole process. What was your read ultimately?
So, I was also part of that Will Levis steam early on, and then, um, it just like, listen, I still think CJ Stroud was the best quarterback in the draft, but I'm trying to square away my opinion of the
Sure.
player versus the information I'm getting. And like Stroud was there was 3 bets that really saved my draft because what I gathered from a lot of people was this draft was humble pie. We've been
Yeah.
cleaning up for years, and this was the first time the bookmaker was able to land a shot back. And I got the information fast enough, had enough outs, slow moving PPHs to attack on Stroud. The most crucial thing that for me was for a few weeks before the draft, I was on the Anthony Richardson. He was actually 3.5. You can actually get you got him pretty close to like minus 110. So at that point, I'm locked into that position. I get the tap around the shoulder like around maybe 3 o'clock that day that hey, the Colts are going to take Anthony Richardson unless by some miracle Bryce Young falls there. He is their guy. He always has been their guy. And then you start connecting the dots. You're like, okay, Shane Steichen in Philadelphia. He had a similar quarterback with a similar skill set in Jalen Hurts, and you're able to get in a pretty good position there. But man, I thought the Houston Texans really threw a wrench into the plans, and it didn't help that two of the best known Houston insiders were on different opinions. They ended up both being wrong.
Yeah.
In John McClain, who frankly he's been great for Houston, but the last few years he hasn't been accurate with his information. And the gentleman on the NFL Network,
Yeah. Lance
um,
Zierlein.
Lance Zierlein,
Yeah.
like he started the whole edge rusher at number 2, and I'm sure part of them trading up for Will Anderson was, hey, we were considering him at number 2. So I thought that uncertainty really created an interesting dynamic in the NFL draft this year.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you're right about they landed a punch in terms of the books one, which makes it even more inexcusable that they're not putting up NBA draft props anywhere
Uh,
for decent liquidity.
I
Like,
blame I blame a gentleman named Drew Dinsick who
they don't
killed
want to.
the NBA
Yeah.
liquidity in the draft.
Yeah, it's and I think the stuff that has come across sometimes that's info based for draft props, if it's not like the only stuff that I think you can say I can run with this to market is literally like the team that is picking first has made their decision and this is who it is. Like if you have that in hand, go fucking crazy. Otherwise, you got to be a little bit problem solving because that you have to kind of build out probability distributions of, well, what if Bryce Young doesn't go first, right? Like, well, what if what if this trade happens? What if this, maybe it's a small probability, and maybe you're willing to, live with the chances of those things happening. But you got to do some problem solving, no matter how good your info is in a draft cycle. Similarly with injury information, right? Like last year NFL preseason was fascinating, right? Like we had good boots in the ground at Bucks camp, and Brady disappeared, right?
Yep.
And um, the immediate reaction from the coaches was what? Like they did not know what was going on. Like
Sure.
100% certainty. Like I can tell you, like true blue, like good information. They did not expect that he was going to leave. And so at that point, it was literally like, is he retiring? Is something, is some, there was a lot of speculative
Yeah.
stuff. And,
Illness,
within,
familial.
yeah, yeah. And 24 hours later, Bowles is out there like, yeah, no, we knew it was going to be, we knew he had some things to take care of. He's going to leave. And it was like, they're lying. like what is happening? Like, this is crazy. Like there's something afoot here. And, it's still not obvious. Well, what do you do with that information? Right. And, there's a lot of ways and things you can, try to make good with that. But there's any kind of information is always a piece of the puzzle. And I think at the end of the day, you're really just in any kind of information market betting. At the end of the day, you're hoping you have one more piece than the market broadly,
Yeah,
and that the puzzle is a little more obvious to you than it is to everybody else.
I noticed in the NFL season, like I follow like 200 beat writers, like 6, 7 per team.
Sure.
And it was San Fran and the Raiders, the second last week of the season. And just an obscure Raiders beat writer types out, "Hey, Derek Carr's contract's guaranteed if he gets injured, and the Raiders are, not they're out of the playoffs now." And then you start to connect the dots. You're like, "Hmm, there's no playoff opportunity. There's a injury risk, and frankly, it's clear that they're done with him, and they may even want to drop a couple positions in the draft." And it's you get on San Fran there, you get it. No, it lost because who knew that Jared Stidham was incredible quarterback
Oh yeah.
who covered the original number. But a lot of the times is you're jumping ahead. You're making sense of the information
Sure.
before anybody else grabs it. And then by the time it hits big news the next day, like there was a whole day where I had that information and I was able to get down before anybody reacted. And that's just connecting the dots because it's one beat writer speculated. He didn't even have information. He was just thinking out loud.
Yeah.
And to me, I go, wow, that makes a lot of sense. I kind of like that theory.
Yeah, yeah. The most common there was a lot of wrong information last year, by the way. I definitely had people who were certain that uh, the broken rib suffered by Justin Herbert meant he was going to miss that Jacksonville game.
Yep.
They were sure, and he played. He played poorly, so it didn't matter ultimately that they were wrong, but they were wrong.
That market crashed hard
That
that
was
day. I think it
incredible.
was Tuesday, and it went from, like, 7 and
Seven
a
and a
half to
half, yeah,
3
three, yeah,
within, like, less than 3 minutes. It was
yeah.
incredible. I remember that
Yeah,
day.
yeah, and it was wrong. Like he
Yeah.
played, he played like shit. But and I am still kicking myself on that one because rather than just be a good soldier and take the Jags, I got frisky and parlayed every Jags price I grabbed with under. Trying to be a smart ass, and sure enough, the Chargers run defense completely no showed in the fourth quarter and gave up like some nasty touchdown to James Robinson, who didn't even finish with the team. But anyway, maybe I'm misremembering. But
Oh, no,
regardless,
yeah, and Herbert was playing for no reason. There's this
yeah,
weird thing about
yeah,
Staley, trying to handicap when he's gonna pull his starters is not a
forget
thing
about it.
because
Yeah,
last year I had a correlated parlay
yeah,
and
yeah,
needed Denver to close, and I'm just sweating the whole game. I'm like,
yeah,
"This guy's not gonna take out his starters. This is unbelievable right
yeah.
now."
But the two biggest regular season results I had to the good, one was the under week one Bucks Cowboys.
Yep.
That was an enormous liquid market. I don't think I've ever seen as liquid a total that wasn't a playoff game or a Super Bowl or whatever. Um, there was a lot of people that were willing to take bets there, and I was basically that was my angle on Brady missing training camp or being away from training camp for surprise reasons. Was that he was going to be rusty and the offensive line injuries and all that, blah blah blah. The other one was the Cowboys Eagles Christmas Eve,
Yes.
right? So that one was fascinating because again, this was not inside information. There was no whispers of Hurts wasn't going to play. There was literally like just one of our friends was like going through the tape on Monday morning and was like, "Did you see this hit to Hurts?" And he like his shoulder got freaking driven late in the game. He didn't throw another pass, and we were like, "Oh." I already had an appetite to bet the Cowboys because I was holding a massive position on Sirianni Coach of the Year, and the only thing that in my mind that could screw that up was them losing to the Cowboys. So I was like already ready to go bet Cowboys in that game anyway, and the number was pretty obviously like right around pick'em ish. Cowboys maybe like one, and you look, you hear Hurts maybe injured, right? You don't. It does not matter if he's going to play or not. If he lands on the injury report with the throwing shoulder injury, you know what's going to happen. The market is going to react violently to that information,
100%.
violently. And if the Cowboys are at home and they're under a field goal, it does not take a rocket scientist to know that the minute that injury report hits the wire, that the number's going over 3. And that's incredibly valuable if you can capture a 3 in that at that time of the season. Like, you just don't get bets like that,
Yeah.
right? And so it was pretty, like, the minute you were like, oof, like, I wanted to bet this anyway. It's going to go across 3 when the injury report hits the wire, and he might not play. This might be a Gardner Minshew game. At which point, maybe this, where does it even stop? Does it go to 6? Like, you're like, this could really get away. And so it was easy call to get as much early week betting down on the Cowboys as possible at those sub 3. Anything less than 3 was a bet. And then, it did turn out he was badly enough hurt that he wasn't going to play. I can't remember when that became public. I think that was late-ish in the week that it was like, they were like, he's definitely out. It's not like doubtful. It was like, he's out. This is a Minshew game. And I forget where the inflection point was, but knowing that you could capture 3 and kind of like, Minshew's not that bad of a quarterback. How much is he really? That whole discussion, has been overreacted. Like, that all made it very, very easy and obvious because, like, don't really trust McCarthy, don't really trust the Cowboys. Like, they burned me enough in the past. Burned me specifically in the game against the Vikings the year prior, I feel like. Like, they had done it.
Dak Prescott didn't play.
Yeah. And
And
then they won
that
anyway.
great number on the Vikings,
And they won anyway.
+3, and
Yeah.
they won anyways with
Yeah.
Cooper Rush. Yeah, I remember the game.
There's been some weird Cowboy stuff anywhere to where, and I've been on the wrong side of enough close calls. Maybe even last season I'd been on enough side of enough close calls that I was like, it's Christmas. I don't want to be stressing on Christmas Eve about Cowboys. So I'm gonna take the Eagles 6s or whatever and hope this lands 3.
Sure.
Captured
and 2 really good numbers.
Yeah.
There.
And I think it landed 3 in a pretty ridiculous way. I don't even remember the game, but it was a Christmas miracle that Cowboys pulled off the defensive stop at the end to make sure that they won that game by 3. That was great.
All right, before we get back to the show, if you are looking to sign up for a new sportsbook account, please check out the offers available at betstamp.app/circlesoff or hit the link in the description. If you sign up through this page, it helps support the show. You talked about information, and I remember a moment last year as well. It was the third last week of the year, and the Titans played the Chargers, and Tannehill gets a high ankle sprain. They end up losing the game. And there was this interesting dynamic where Titans didn't need to win any other game that season except the final game of the year against Jacksonville. They almost had 2 dead games that were meaningless. And the line opened 7.5. And I'm like, no, Tannehill hurt his ankle. He finished the game, which was incredible. And he looked awful finishing the game. They scored 7 points total. At that moment, I don't even need to go through my handicapping process. I'm like, this number's off. And there's no way Tannehill's going to play against Houston in a meaningless game. That game ends up closing 2.5. And that's just purely an informational play. I kind of want to talk about your process. There's good advantages with information. You bet NBA, NFL, and tennis. Do you have the same process for all 3? Are you originating your numbers? Do you observe the markets? Are you handicapping how the matchups play against each other?
Yeah, they are 3 very different handicaps. The reason I gravitated there for those 3 sports in particular has nothing to do with similarity of the handicap. It is entirely based on just the calendar. Like, tennis and NFL are complementary because the tennis season kind of gets going as the NFL is winding down, and it ends at the U.S. Open as the NFL is starting back up. NBA is kind of in the mix there. Fine, it starts at a decent time where the edges in the NFL, in my opinion, get a little narrower. You're doing a little more coin flipping and a little less handicapping, unless you have an injury, unless you haven't, basically wherever you were right, wherever the market was wrong at the start of a season on a prior, it's been sharpened by October. So I don't mind dedicating a little time to the NBA at that point. But the processes for the 3 sports are completely different. The market in the NFL matters so much more than the other 2 sports because it's so much more liquid, and because the market cycle itself is so dynamic and different things happen at different times during the week. And like, you almost need to be more market literate than you need to know anything about the sport of football, in my opinion, to really be successful at betting the NFL. Matchups, of course, matter. Situational stuff matters. The number, whatever number you come up with, in my opinion, for an NFL game, it ought to be like my process is come up with a fair price that's quantitatively based,
Yeah.
and then add qualitative layers to it. And if you want to take those qualitative layers you have and actually quantify them, fine. Go wild. It's sometimes you're dealing with small sample size problems, so I don't really think it's worth it in the NFL. I think you just have to kind of accept the fact that better off just building a probability distribution in your head and go for it. Don't like spend the time to build out a numerical, a numerical process. In my opinion, other people probably think that's ridiculous and they're laughing at me, but that's fine. So I come up with a number, add the qualitative layer to it, and then time the market, and that's the name of the game in the NFL. NBA is almost purely quant, very little qualitative layer. Everything I do in the NBA is quantified. I'm literally just punching, execute. What are the fares? Okay, let's go bet them. Like I'm grinding a tiny edge insides over the balance of the season, and
Okay.
I'm just trying to keep my head above water, right? Like whereas where I would say NFL is 60-40 qualitative, NBA is 95-5 quantitative, and tennis is a little bit kind of split the middle there. It's mostly quantitative, but there are definitely qualitative aspects related to kind of form that you can only really get if you or one of your friends is watching the matches, right? Like there's an eyeball test that matters more, in my opinion, for tennis than for the other two sports. Like I don't think you need to watch football to be able to win betting it. You definitely do not need to be able to watch you don't need to watch basketball to win. I know that for
Okay.
sure. If you like basketball, you enjoy it, go for it. But I don't even think the eye test matters a ton, other than random small stuff like injuries and form, specific being able to eye test how a player is being utilized in a system and whether it's working or not. That matters. Playoffs, it definitely matters. Eye test in NBA is so funny because the regular season is so quantitative and then it's all vibes in the playoffs. It's just like flips on its head. It's so weird. But the process for tennis, you need an eye on the players to be able to tell about what's going
What are
on.
you looking for? Are you looking for how tired they were the match before and how they struggled in certain situations?
Because it's one on one, because there's no team aspect, injury and form can be picked off by eye more so than it can be by any number or by any data, right? You're literally looking for just you're using the eye test for, I've seen this player play on the surface before. They're doing something different. They're doing something that looks injured. You can pick up some things numerically, like this guy's first serve is down from 160 to 130. Like that's a problem. Like you can pick up some quantitative stuff if you really have good data, but tennis data is pretty hard to come by other than tennis abstract. But eye on form matters a ton, especially because like I think what it comes down to is it's one on one. So the actual, what's going on with that player in any given moment, it matters so much that I think that kind of aspect is pretty important. But there are probably good examples you could point out in the NFL where you're like, if I wasn't watching that game, I wouldn't have seen this and I wouldn't know.
Sure.
Sure. But I think overall, I tend to compartmentalize when I'm watching NFL and not get too caught up in mental model reactionary stuff from what I'm seeing on the film or on a broadcast, because broadcast, you're not even seeing all the players, you're just watching the quarterback.
It also helps that the NFL, like, information is so readily available.
Oh sure.
Like, all you have to do is like scroll through Twitter for 10 minutes and you've got your fill on information that's flying out there. So you say tennis is a lot of like eye test and one-on-one. To me, that's what boxing is. And when I
Yeah,
bet
there you
boxing,
go.
the data doesn't matter. I don't care that he's got a 25% defense rate. At that moment, it's styles make fights. How do they match up against each other? Common opponents, how do they look against them? And you start to create factors like that when you're pursuing who you're going to bet in boxing. So I'm guessing tennis is a bit like that.
Absolutely, without question. Yeah.
One last question: futures. It's one of those, you either love futures or you hate them. And I know some pros hate them. They don't want to tie up their money. They want to be able to roll their money over daily. I happen to like it. I think it's a two-parter. It's an opportunity to make money, but it's also, you create an emotional attachment to a team, and you're basically managing a stock position, right? It's not immediate, if you've won or lost that week. You're watching where the price is going and how it shapes up, and you're trying to determine, how long do I ride, or is there an opportunity to get out, make some money, and be happy about it? Do you like playing futures?
Yeah, absolutely. It's you brought up all the key points, I think, but for the most part, there's still a gambler in me at the end of the day, and winning a 30-1 is awesome. And you can't do that on game by game betting, right? Like, I'm not a robot. I probably have some, I'm on the spectrum in some ways, I'm sure, but I definitely don't. I'd like to, to get a big price home, and awards markets are kind of the name of the game in that regard. They're, the futures for championship equity are a little less dynamic, so they're a little less fun. They're a little less. You're a little less able to really get an edge out there, as far as I can tell you. But the awards markets are volatile. The
Yo,
volatility is awesome. It's awesome. It makes it for a fun handicap. It makes it for, the disagreements there. The disagreements between books is fun. You can still price shop in awards markets,
yeah,
and and you can craft and use unique ways with basically your opinion, and just the time aspect of it is pretty unique for NFL futures. Like, you can figure out pretty readily which, what teams, what players the market has appetite for, and look at their schedule the first 4 weeks and decide, man, if they go 3-1 or 4-0, these prices are going to get nuked. And at the end of the day, is the best bet on the board probably Pat Mahomes MVP? Sure. Is the best price you're going to get this moment? Probably not. Like, almost certainly there's going to be a good chunk of the season where people, human nature is what it is. People can't help themselves. There's going to be debates about, is Burrow better than Mahomes? Is Josh Allen better than Mahomes? Was a topic for like chunks of last season.
I remember.
And ultimately,
I remember.
yeah, ultimately it's like people can't help themselves. They're going to find ways to, shape those MVP market. I'm not going to bet Mahomes 6 plus 650, even though it's a good bet, because I feel like you're going to be able to get it at a better number at some point this year, unless they go undefeated out of the stretch and they're 8-0, and it's just it's just a foregone conclusion. But that, even that, I don't mind missing out on, because, like, if they're just destroying out of the gate, and everybody's like, oh, this is decided mid-season, like, that doesn't always hold up.
No, there's other guys,
Yeah,
especially because it's almost like the last thing you did is what people remember.
of
And
course.
if you see like a primetime stack of games in the last 3 weeks for a team, and a guy's in the hunt, oftentimes if you do it with the most eyeballs on you, it can really shift the markets.
No question. So I think, market timing, and it's just a fun game. It's a fun puzzle. It's better. It's better than, you know, hitting execute on an NBA side and firing a bet. I'll tell you that much. Yeah,
We all have the one future that we remember.
sure.
When I say that, what's the one that what and it's not even always the most money. Sometimes it's just the one you're the most connected to.
Yeah.
What was the one future for you?
Yeah. So this goes back to we can close the loop here. My sportsbook.com account. After I won my $100 on Long Beach State, this was in December-ish. I had completely bought into the Patriots were a team of destiny. And I guess this must have been 2001 then, right? Because this was right after 9/11 that they won the Super Bowl for the first time against the Rams. I don't entirely remember the timing, but I can tell you with perfect clarity of mind that at the end of that season, I was bought into the hype that the Patriots were the team of destiny. They were going to win the Super Bowl with Tom Brady. And I took my $200 or whatever and put it on Patriots at 20-1 or something. And it it was a wild ride with the stuck rule game and the game against the Steelers where Brady was hurt, and then ultimately a Super Bowl where they were 12-point dogs or whatever it was, and it won, and it paid for me to be able to go to Cancun on spring break, and I got my check in the mail from what was like a Chinese holding company that it looked like the most fraudulent scam of all time.
Yeah.
And it literally had tire tracks, like somebody had gone to the trouble of putting it on the ground and driving over it in the hopes that it would never be cashed or something. And I get it in the mail, and I walked into the bank after here you go, and I'm waiting for like the manager to come around and be like, "Son, come with me," and I'm like, "I really want to go on spring break, man. Like,
Yeah.
please cash this."
Yeah.
Like, I can't. Like, I've already committed to tickets on this charter plane. Like, please, yeah. So that was clearly the most memorable future I've ever had, and you know, I don't think I've hit actually a super long shot Super Bowl winner since then. Actually, now that I think about it.
You said, it felt like they were a team of destiny. This is so funny 'cause it for my favorite future of all time. So, I win a small future, the year the Patriots go undefeated. I basically took the notion because the market was that was it. They were like 24-point favorites, against the Baltimore Ravens with Ray Lewis, who always play everyone tight. The market decided this is the team, and I'm like, "Let me just fade them. Let me just pick 3 teams that I believe can beat them." I ended up taking one of the teams was the Giants, and it was all based on that week 17 game that neither team needed to win, but they played it down to the wire, if you remember, and it was a field goal game. So the Giants were
Oh
still
yeah.
entering the playoffs at like 35-1 because they were the wild card team. So I win that play, and 2 years later, I'm at a stag and I win a prize. It's an Eli Manning jersey. And if you 2 years after that, the Giants win again. And I remember there was a story of a baseball bettor who bet the St. Louis Cardinals at 999-1 with like 2.5 months to go. It was a legendary story. If you Google ESPN, St. Louis Cardinals, they were like 20 games out of the division with like 2.5 months to go. And he goes and he puts $1,000 on it. He's just this. He became a millionaire because they were 999-1. I saw this and I said, man, I would love to one time in my life make over 30K on a bet. So the Giants are entering that year 35-1, and I end up putting $1,000 on the Giants. And I just kept having this belief. I'm like, it was very similar to. Did you Google the St. Louis Cardinals?
Yeah.
You see it, right?
Yeah. I
So
can't believe I've never heard this story.
this inspired me to because I just said it wasn't about. I just said I want to win over $30,000. That was the number I had
Yeah.
in my head. At this point, I'm not a pro gambler. I still do all the things wrong. So I end up I said, this Giants team is similar to when they won it. They got the good pass rush, they got decent offensive weapons. Let me bet them. The season goes on. There's another opportunity. I take another stab at 50-1. And then finally, it's December 11th. I remember to this day. So this is week 15, and they're a game out of the division. So they're being priced like having no chance, and they wouldn't make the playoffs if it wasn't for winning the division. That's how bad their record was. But they happen to be playing the Dallas Cowboys that evening. So it's 72-1. And I said, let me just put $100 more. I've gone this far. Let me go one more time. They end up beating the Dallas Cowboys, and everyone can Google this stuff. It was like week 15, Sunday night. They end up beating the Dallas Cowboys. They get into the playoff race. I remember everything. I remember against the Atlanta Falcons holding them to 2 points. I remember they beat the Packers with a halftime Hail Mary to Hakeem Nicks. I remember Victor Cruz salsaing all season. I remember the game against the 49ers in the NFC Championship game. And I remember them winning the Super Bowl against the Patriots again. And the common thread was, man, it's fate. And the funny thing was there was a legendary local book in Toronto at the time. It was called Platinum Sportsbook. And these guys used to throw Super Bowl parties. It was very well known. Ended up being raided a couple years later and shut down. And I became known as the dumb kid on the Danforth who had $50,000 in futures on the Giants and did not want to hedge. So when they won, I wasn't even sure if I was going to get paid. I ended up going with my cousin to meet up with this bookie, and I'm like, we got to meet in a public space because I'm terrified. Like I've never been handed 50K in cash. I don't believe this is going to happen. So when you say fate, that was the one driving thread for me the whole way is this is fate. I won on the Giants 4 years ago. I won the jersey at a stag, and I saw the St. Louis Cardinals bet that year and said I want to make at least 30,000. That was my only goal that year.
Incredible. Wow. Well, I think the underlying lesson here is that you don't get to this point without survivorship bias.
Yeah.
Colt McCoy loses to the Cowboys. I'm like gambling's for suckers. Never again.
Absolutely. Drew, I want to thank you, man. You were such a great guest. And you know what? For my first episode, I knew I wanted to reach out to you. So I'm really thankful.
Of course. This is a ton of fun, and best of luck. And I can't wait to hear who you guys line up next, because very, very much enjoy this feed.
All right. That's it for me. My first episode as the host of the 90 Degrees podcast. There's some thanks I'd like to give before we go to my guest, Drew Dinsick, co-host of the Deep Dive podcast and analyst for NBC Sports Edge. I want to thank Alex Moretto, Rob Pizzola, Johnny, the whole Hammer Betting Network team, and of course, my right-hand man behind the scenes, my producer, Jason Cooper. I want you to like the content, subscribe, share, comment, even if it's positive or negative. I appreciate the engagement. It helps to get this content in front of as many people as possible. We'll be back next week with another guest on the 90 Degrees podcast, where we give an inside look into the sports betting industry. That's it for me. I hope you enjoyed. Until next time.